And now I'm just going to tell you a little about our guests of honor before I let them get started. Jim Shepard is the author of 7 previous novels, most recently The Book of Erin, and 5 short story collections, including Like You to Understand Anyway, which was a finalist for the National Book Award and won the Story Prize. He lives in Williamstown, Massachusetts with his wife, 3 children, and 3 beagles, and he teaches at Williams College. Chloe Shaw lives in Connecticut with her husband, 2 kids, and 2 dogs, important to note in an event like this. And of course, What is a Dog is her literary debut. In this beautiful memoir that the Washington Post called elegant, heartwarming, and heartwarming, get your tissues ready, I mentioned earlier, Chloe takes us on an emotional journey anyone who has ever loved and lost a dog will connect with. She discovers dogs do more than just make our lives better. They quietly and sometimes loudly pull us toward the person that we were always meant to be. To put it simply, John Irving said that the book for anyone who has ever loved a dog, which I'd imagine is quite a few of us here tonight, including myself. RJ Julia and Wesley and RJ Julia are so grateful to have Chloe and Jim here to celebrate the release of What is a Dog? And as I mentioned earlier, we're also happy to be hosting this event in partnership with the Dan Cosgrove Animal Shelter. So I'm going to pass things off now to Director Laura Bourbon to tell us a little bit more about the shelter, and then Chloe and Jim will take it from there. So thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you for letting me be here today. I'm really excited to be a part of this and so happy for Chloe. We've known Chloe for many, many years, and she actually did some volunteer work for us, I don't know, probably 10 years ago now, by creating cards for us, and has just always been an animal lover, so we're so happy for you. The Dan Cosgrove Animal Shelter serves pretty much the entire shoreline, if not the entire state. We take in all different kinds of animals, everything from dogs and cats to guinea pigs and hamsters. Right now we have ducks and chickens and chinchillas and mice and all sorts of creatures. And one of our focuses that we're doing right at this moment is we're fundraising for a new building and an expansion on the current building. Because we take in all sorts of animals, we're looking to have them be housed in separate rooms appropriately and have air conditioning throughout the building. So we're really excited about that. And anybody who wants to join us on this journey of raising money towards that new building can go to cosgrovesavinglives.org. And you can learn about all the things that we do at the shelter, as well as what we're trying to raise the money for. So like I said, we take in all different kinds of animals, and one of the biggest things that we focus on at the shelter is education. We believe that education is key to helping people understand how to care for their animals properly. And right now, especially, there's so many people calling the shelter because they adopted animals during the pandemic and are sort of figuring out what to do next since they're going back to work and they're going on vacation. So we think with this new shelter, we'll be able to help people a lot more because we're going to actually have an education room there as well. So people can come in and learn about caring for different types of animals and also what to do when they're in a situation that they're not sure exactly how to handle with the behavior of a certain kind of animal. So like I said, we're really excited to be here today, and we're excited to support Chloe in this venture of her new book. And if anybody wants to help us with our new building, like I said, go to cosgrovesavinglives.org. And I think Jim is up next to talk. So I'm going to pass it on to Jim.
Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Laura. Everybody hear me? Thanks, Laura. And hi, Chloe. Oh my God. Good to see you.
You too.
Oh, you sound sad.
I sound sad.
Is it the self-promotion that's getting to you?
It's so wonderful to see you. And
Lovely
to have you here with me. It's very.
Can we start with your beautiful prose and maybe have you read something? I won't be quite so controlling as to suggest what it is you read.
Oh, I'm gonna choose it?
You're gonna choose it.
Oh boy.
That in itself will be eloquent.
Okay. Yes. I might just start at the beginning.
That'll work.
Yeah. This is a new development in the pandemic. I need these.
That.
Okay. May 2015. I was lying on the cool black and white tile of our kitchen floor, resting my head on Booker's huge hairy chest. It was late. The house was quiet. He smelled like cinnamon rolls baking in a barn. I smelled like dog. I went to visit Booker's nook of the room often, lying along the side of his beige orthopedic mattress, which sat these days more like a hospice bed rolled into the heart of our home. At 15 years old, your 90s if you're a dog, and a big, big dog at that, he had trouble walking, trouble even getting up. For 2 years, my husband, Matt, and I had been using a harness which had become a part of him, warmed from the inside out like his fur to lift him, an act that at times took on acrobatic grace and at others reminded me of the shame my elderly grandparents showed when they started needing similar help. It's about time to wash it again, I was thinking, his smell now more barn than pastry. As we moved him, he licked us as if to say, that hurts, or thank you, or it's going to be okay. It was a glossy, bleak place at which to have arrived. But there we were every day, trying to figure out if he was ready to die, and if he was, whether we were ready to let him. What do you know about death, dog? You'll know, people told us. Animals have their ways. He'll tell you when it's time. As I stood in the kitchen washing the dishes at night or packing lunches in the morning, looking over at his bed amid the maze of cheap rugs we'd lined the slippery floor with so that he could navigate the path to his food bowl and the outside, I wondered, does he still want to be here? Somewhere down under the sleek white poof of his skull, is he scared? These thoughts would fill up a good part of me until I'd finally queue up The Only Thing by Sufjan Stevens so that I could cry, sometimes in private, thinking I might upset Booker, and sometimes with my whole body on top of his, fur wet and matted where my face pressed in. Explaining Booker's health to our human kids was complicated. Yes, he was still with us, and yet a great big part of him was already gone. Historically, the sound of the back door opening had sent Booker leaping up and out onto the lawn. Now he didn't even flinch. His eyebrows quivered in mild recognition of the pressure change, but his body held firm to the floor. Was it his heart that had turned? Matt had the remarkable capacity to approach Booker with the same big grin, no matter how Booker responded. I feel like even the dog knew my smile was pretend. Or was it my heart that had turned? Was this feeling proof that it had started making space for the hurt where only love had been? 9 years. 9 years since I'd met Booker and Matt on that downy path in the woods. 9 years I'd been feeling myself walk farther away from my old broken selves toward the woman I'd hoped might be out there. For nearly a third of my life, I'd been mom to this bucking, benevolent beast. Several years even before I'd had human children of my own. Before kids begged me for more milk, more love, more baby beluga. I'd had Booker begging me for just 10 more minutes in the woods, Mom, please. 10 more minutes in this muddy glop. Before panicked visits to pediatricians, there were late night visits to the vet. Why won't he open that eye? Use that leg? What's this lump on his head? Lying in bed at night, I couldn't quite wrap my mind around it. The dog that had brought Matt and me together was the same dog who might now be looking to us to bring him peace. How could the life that brought me peace be the thing in question here? There was no baseline for canine happiness anymore. If a dog is a wolf whose heart thumps toward something human, we didn't know what the wolf or dog in him was telling us. What if the wolf longed to slink off into the woods and die, but the dog still felt tethered to the ache in our eyes, the way humans sometimes can't die until their loved ones hop home for a shower.
That was gorgeous, Chloe. Thank you. I'm glad you chose that passage because, as the post review suggests, you know, the book is really beautifully moving about both how exhilarating it is to love a dog and how crushing it is to lose one. And one of the things the book does so well is describe Booker's last days, especially the agony of every day trying to figure out if his quality of life has deteriorated so much you can let him go. I think you have a line in there, something like, structurally, he was like a building whose I-beam had collapsed or something.
Yeah.
And that account that you give of when Booker is finally euthanized in yours and Matt's arms, oh my God, I think you say something like, when he closes his eyes, you realize you'll never see those eyes again. And then when his paws stop like he's in mid-leap. Come on, Chloe, not a dry eye in the house at that point.
Are you trying to make me cry now?
I'm trying to make you cry. That's what I'm doing. One startlingly wise observer has characterized your book as not only being a wrenchingly tender tribute to a beloved dog and a meditation on what dogs mean to us, but also a stirring account of one woman's transformation. That seemed like a startlingly insightful thing that I said about when I was blurbing it. Was it always a part of your design to use Booker as a lens through which you would examine other aspects of your life? Or did you start out thinking this was a safer book and it was just going to be a history of Booker and a history of Chloe's dogs?
It did start out as a little bit of a history of Chloe's dogs. But honestly, the first draft, I wrote 6 drafts of this book, and the early ones had so much more personal stories. And my editor, one of my editors, Bob, just kept saying, more dogs, more dogs.
It's quite funny when they say less Chloe and more dogs.
Less Chloe and more dogs. It was actually so helpful because, from the beginning, it was meant to be a meditation on dogs and my life with them and my kind of evolution with them, with each one differently. And so, that was very helpful, actually, having that editor, because I think I could have gotten a little lost in the weeds of, what this book is really about. I never intended to write a memoir. And so when it was something that was, introduced to me, it was a bit overwhelming, the M word. And so I took that to heart, and I do think each dog, talking about each dog and kind of going through each story really brought out the important themes of the book.
But you still had to keep a balance, right? Because I think you'd probably say the central subject of the book may be the way a dog can patiently sort of uncover in us that better version of ourselves. And so we have to see in the book some version of what Chloe needs to work on and how that work takes place, besides just how amazing these dogs are, right?
Yeah.
So I assume the editor didn't want to lose everything in that regard.
Not at all, yeah. Yeah.
There's that moment a year after Booker's death when you describe yourself arranging some solitude for yourself. I think you say something like, I need the meaning of me without the perpetual presence of the other. That feels like it was scaled back. Was it hard figuring out how much emphasis to give that part of the book? Or was that a part of that same conversation where you were just a blanket version of less Chloe, more dog?
No, it felt very you know, that time that I spent alone. You're talking about the doghouse period where I was alone. Yeah. You know, I felt very, that part felt like I was, you know, with my dogs in those moments, of course, the two dogs that were still with me. But I did feel like that was where I kind of had the most vulnerable moments in the book. You know, some in my childhood too, for sure, but that it just opened up space for me to kind of think and, you know, having young kids and then being certainly, I mean, this was pre-pandemic when I wrote the book, but yeah, I think just having that time and space was, it felt like that was where I could open up more. Yeah.
You know, one of the reasons I ask is because solitude is so important as a concept to Chloe, right?
Yes.
One of the things you say about the family that you grew up in was that, you know, you not only did you learn that you're always fine, but you learned in that way to be deeply private, right? And I think you had a lovely line where you said something like, it was children in your family were expected to be celebrated, but not always seen. So solitude is a very double-bladed thing, right, for the Chloe figure, because on the one hand, it's exactly what she is drawn to in dysfunctional ways, and in other ways, it's a healing thing, right? Do dogs feel like writing for you in that regard, in terms of what each have enabled, in terms of coming to terms with solitude and transcending it? Because it's striking how often you'll talk about dogs as though they have that ability to help you uncover stuff that otherwise you wouldn't work to uncover, you know?
Yeah, so I feel like they have been, yeah, that's a good, yeah, I like that question. So
Ratified.
I feel like being with the dogs in my life has, they've been sort of a portal for me to kind of access the bigger emotions, or just, you know, broader emotions, because they, you know, they're just who they are in the moment always. I mean, you know, they're going to tell you who they are and how they feel at any moment. That was definitely a struggle for me as a kid, or I would say through many of my years, is being very, you know, upfront in how I feel. So I think writing, you know, in a way, dogs came first for me. I mean, my dog Agatha, who was my Scottish Terrier when I was a kid, she was kind of my first portal. And then when I discovered writing, that they do sort of serve this, they did serve the same purpose for me, I would say, but kind of in different ways, because dogs, the dog, you know, I talk about being the dog. I would kind of become the dog. I would just want to infuse myself and just disappear from myself. Where writing was also another way to, I guess, escape myself. But it was also a more expressive way.
And also training in the empathetic imagination in a way that you had very huge stakes in, right? Not only are you, as a writer, sitting there trying to imagine your way into a character, but with a dog, as you're saying, the dogs are right there for you. They're emotionally transparent in some ways, and they're present in a way you wish you could be.
Right.
But dogs are also, on some way, you know, they're different species. So on some level, they're also opaque.
Yeah.
What the book does very well is get at the essential mystery behind the dog as well, right? Because there's so many staged moments where Chloe's deeply gratified to have this dog present, but also then in her anxious way goes, but what is really going on in Booker's head, right? Can I really know?
Yeah.
And that's such a lovely spur towards empathy, right? Because you're determined to figure out what's going on in this other head, you know?
Oh.
It's a lovely thing that you stage over and over again. You know, that you have that moment also where you say about your family that to feel was to need and to need was messy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you think about it, that kind of worldview could, of course, neatly compartmentalize need in the figure of a dog, right? We're going to keep need over here with Booker. And because we have Booker, we don't need to learn any better version of that. Booker is the one who will handle that. Why do you think it didn't in your case? What gave you, do you think, the permission to need rather than to simply go, well, needing is going to be Booker's job?
Well, I think therapy. I did. I mean, truthfully, it's true. I mean, going to therapy and, you know, at the same time as I was kind of, you know, a new mom and having this incredible dog that we were losing, it kind of all got wrapped up into a bundle that was, you know, I could finally kind of express all of what you're kind of referring to, but I didn't know the words for it before that. I mean, and dogs certainly don't help with that. They don't speak our language, obviously, and we have to kind of, you know, figure them out from another angle and listen and know that they're not going to answer us in the way that we want them to. But if we pay attention, they do. You know, they give us their answers. But yeah, no, I mean, I really going to therapy and talking it out, and I think that it's really the answer.
It's another lovely parallel with writing, right? As you say, as you put it, I don't know the words for it until I work it through and get the words for it.
Yeah.
But since this is in many ways the love story of a man and a woman and a dog, can you tell a short version of how the short version of how you met Booker and Matt, both because it's a really sweet story and also because it'll enable us to publicly celebrate our mutual friend, Sid.
I was hoping you would say that. Yes. So Jim was my teacher and my professor in college. I worked with his wife first, Karen, who's also amazing. Yes. And then I took 2 classes with Jim, and in one of them, the first one, I met Sid, who is incredible too. And she and I just hit it off right away, just mutually kind of admiring of each other's words. And the difference though is Sid, I never talked, I mean, this is like the most I've ever talked to Jim, maybe ever. I did not speak in class, and Sid did, and I was a little intimidated, but also very impressed. And anyway, long story short, she was at a house in New Haven, I don't know, just at a party, and she overheard someone saying, "Oh, I went to Williams College," and which is where we went, and she immediately asked the man who had said, "I went to Williams," who he was and when did you graduate and everything. And then she immediately wanted to introduce me to him. And this was Matt. And I, at the time, really had no interest in meeting a man. And then she said, she kind of waited weeks and weeks, maybe a few weeks. And then finally she said, "Did I tell you he has a dog?" And I said, "No, you did not. And when can I meet the dog?" And that's how I met my husband. Thank you, Sid. Hi.
It was very canny of Sid to do it that way, don't you think?
Yes, very.
Let's talk a little bit more about the myriad ways in which dogs work to improve Chloe. How about the way all of these dogs have taught you about living with anxiety? It's not just therapy, right? It's also being around these animals.
It's definitely, that's true. Yeah. So my dog, Agatha, my Scottish Terrier, when I was basically from 6 to 18, she was just such a lifeline for me. And I recognized that right away. I'm an only child, and I grew up in a very loving household, but a kind of quiet one, and emotionally quiet too. And so I would disappear into my room, which was kind of my just blissful, safe place. And she would come with me. And I think from that moment, when we bonded, I really just felt just a kind of an expanse, and just like everything opened up, and I realized I could just be whoever I wanted to be. And, I would listen to music, I would sing music, I would cry, I could really just do anything that I felt around humans was much harder.
Given that one of the ways you articulated anxiety in the book was, memorably, was the more madly I love you, the more often I picture losing you. Do you remember saying that?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Could you talk a little about the transitions between Agatha 1 and 2? Because it would seem as though one of the other things that Agatha 1 taught you the hard way is that loss is not the end of the world, right? As horrible as it is.
Because the second came along?
Well, because, if the more I madly love you, the more I picture losing you is apocalyptic, what happens if I lose her? What happens if I lost her. And then Agatha 2 came along and I was able to love again. Right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was realizing today, actually, to go back to Booker just for a second, Booker's death really was the first, I feel like it was the first real death and grief experience that I showed up fully for, meaning we dug his grave, we kissed him between the eyes after his heart had stopped. I'd never done that with certainly anyone, but even the animals in my house. Agatha, the transition from Agatha 1 to Agatha 2, I do think was kind of the beginning stages of what I realized then when Booker died. I mean, I think Booker's death really broke me wide open, but I do think losing, 4 dogs before that, in retrospect, was kind of a process that I wasn't aware that was happening at the time, but was definitely a part of that journey of kind of accepting loss and recognizing grief and all of the very hard emotions, related to that those deaths, which I really hadn't done before. Yeah.
Yeah. The book does a very nice job with the ways in which you both negotiate and fail to negotiate those moments step by step, And, coming back to that issue of the balance between human and dog, book is also smart in the ways in which the dogs begin really to become possibly counterproductive in emotional terms as well. Although it's not the central subject of the book. You know, there's that nice point, I think it's pretty late in the book, where you say about your relationship with Matt that he'd asked for more space for us humans and I kept adding dogs.
Yeah, yeah.
That's one of the harder aspects of the book to talk about. And of course, by that point, the book is sort of hurtling along and that stuff gets elided a little bit. But could you talk a little bit about the decision to because, you know, that's the part for us dog lovers, that's the difficult part of the subject, right? The ways we use dogs not to make ourselves better human beings. And there's a little bit of that, but mostly, you know, the book is a celebration of what dogs can do for us, right?
Yeah.
Did that stuff creep in late? Was it always there? What's your relationship to that material?
So you mean the part about just kind of adding dogs
dogs being counterproductive?
Yeah. It did. Yeah. I've had that. I feel like I've had that experience mostly with the last two dogs we've gotten. Safari, who's now 13, but really Otter, he's 3 now. And I do, you know, I adore him with my entire heart. And there are times when I regret that I pushed to kind of get him, because it really did feel like this pattern I was on of like, you know, there is a part of me that just has this theory and desire that, you know, Booker, this wonderful dog that we lost, that the dogs that, you know, come after him kind of embody him if they overlap. So, you know, we got Safari when Booker was 8, I think, and he was a puppy. And then like watching that love grow, and then Booker died, and then getting Otter, it felt like something I just wanted to continue, that like majestic animal, you know, they just live on in each other. But I think I also, in that time in my life, I wasn't also thinking of our entire family. I wasn't sort of, you know, taking that in as a whole. It was something I really wanted, but I'm not sure the entire family did. And, you know, everyone's like, we just embrace him and love him, but it definitely, it's not without a little bit of regret of, I was very much in a place that you're kind of referring to of still just going to the dogs for stuff that I actually needed to do within me. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure your editor at this point would be saying we're getting way too human-centric here. So let me just go back to the subject of Safari and Otter. And since we do have probably a few dog lovers listening in, why don't you just differentiate between their virtues? What's so great about Safari and what's so great about Otter in a few words?
Safari is, I've always felt like he's, I feel like we are each other in different species. He's anxious, and he's very sweet though. He's very, he's only gotten sweeter as he's gotten older. And
he reminds you of you?
I don't know that I'm getting sweet. I think I'm actually getting less sweet, but it's more that he's, I don't know, just his anxieties and the way he approaches the world. Something that I really admire in him is that he has all these anxieties, yet he's still willing to go out and approach the world. And I say this in the book, but I do feel like that's one of the most brave things I see on a daily basis. And I sort of feel like I can relate to that. And yeah, and he's just a little snuggly, fluffy guy. Otter is he's the dog that actually made me really appreciate what dogs are actually, in truth. That was the most surprising thing about writing this book and sort of thinking about all my dogs. Because he is just such a dog. He, instead of all these dogs that I've had before him, where I feel like I've tried to just put my human self into them and, bring their human characteristics out. He is just always telling me what a dog, like a wolf, basically. He's a wolf, he's telling me like, I'm here and I'll be with you. But he just has all these like idiosyncrasies that are just a bit wild and a bit feral and a bit wolf. So in a way, spending time with him it actually feels like such an honor to spend time with him just as much as any of the other books. But he really has been almost the most kind of life-changing in terms of my relationship with dogs, dog that I've had. Yeah.
It's interesting. It's like going back to what we were saying about the limits and the possibilities of empathetic connection. Those are the two poles, right? Safari, I love because he reminds me so much of what it means to be an anxious human, and Otter I love because he reminds me that I have no idea what's going on in Otter's head.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. No, I know. It's just, that's definitely true. Yeah, of Otter. Yeah.
Gives you a lovely idea also of what a wide range of relationships, sort of happy relationships we can have with dogs, right? Across the spectrum. Oh my God, I so imagine myself in this dog, and oh my God, I so do not, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, again, Otter's been the biggest surprise to me because it's the first dog that I've ever had that I'm like, oh, okay, we are very different. But I still love him and I respect him.
As I'm sure you were saying to everybody when you were writing this is kind of an odd hybrid of a book. What kind of models or influences did you have to help you think, oh, I think it's sort of like that, what I'm trying to do?
So I did not plan on writing this book. And one of my editors, Bob, definitely gave me the order of, you may not read any dog books. And I think it was very smart. So I really didn't have, I didn't read any, and I say dog book. I don't know that this is just a dog book. I would think it's covers some other territories too, but I certainly didn't plan on reading him or writing a memoir. So I don't know that I don't think I can say that I had a model. I mean, only all the wonderful writing that I've read in my life. But I really didn't. I mean, especially in terms of memoir, it was really a pretty stressful 2 years and very rewarding in the end. But it was, when you're not planning on writing about your life and then you have to figure out what belongs in the book and what doesn't, that's a lot.
And how much did you map out in advance, even though it was probably not going to remain mapped out the way it was designed?
Well, I wrote 6 drafts of it.
And that first draft was written without an outline or a design, or with one?
Yeah, no. Well, sorry, the answer to that question is definitely that, I had published an essay of the same title.
And
It was,
right?
yeah, it was in the American Scholar. And that came out, and that's actually how my editor found me. He just, he read it and approached me about writing a book version. And so, I mean, that was the map for sure, but it was, a 10-page essay. So then to kind of try to think about how to blow that open into an actual book was something I kind of had to figure out. And so I think those early drafts, I mean, I ended up just writing and writing and writing and writing. And each one, like I said, more dogs, but also like just paring down the stories that I was including. Yeah.
And did the dog histories get pared down as well, or did they pretty much stay intact?
I think everything got pared down a bit, and but it was definitely more just just personal life history that got pared down, yeah, which was the right thing for this book. And I have to share though right now, because you gave me the best advice ever, which is about writing autobiography. Well, at the time I was writing fiction with you, and I was stressed about including any kind of, personal stories, autobiographical fiction. And you said, which I have just used constantly, you said, well, you can either not care, hope they don't read it, or wait till they die. And I'm going to say hi to my mom and dad, who are doing great, and my husband and kids. They didn't choose to write this book, so that was definitely a I had to figure that out for myself, what felt like belonged in it and what felt like the right story for this book, the right material.
Now, given that, as we were saying before, Chloe does have a special relationship to anxiety, I'm assuming, even as generous-hearted as this book was, you were quite fretful about how your loved ones were going to read it.
Yeah.
But it's been nothing but good news since then, I assume.
It's been good, yes, it has been good. My kids who are watching, they are desperate to read it. I think they're not old enough quite yet, but
that's interesting. What is the right age for reading this book, do you think?
I don't know. I have no idea, but
it's not their age.
I think not. 8 and 11. They're 8 and 11.
Now you've doubled your readership because everybody thinks there's something naughty in there that they want to get to, essentially. Well, I've been hogging things a little bit too much. I assume at this point that we're supposed to be taking questions. Is that right, Abby?
We do have some audience questions for Chloe. Let's see here. So someone in our audience would like to know when you started writing this book. I know it went through a few drafts, so.
Yeah, it did. So I wrote the essay that came before the book. It was published, let's see, I wrote it in March of 2018. And then that May, I started writing the book. So it took about 2.5 years. I luckily kind of finished right before the pandemic. I did a little bit of editing during the pandemic, but I finished basically right as it started. So about 2.5 years.
Oh, yeah. Not bad. Let's see. Another question here, because you mentioned earlier that you had not planned to write a memoir and that you had been studying fiction previously. So this person is interested in hearing about how the seeds of that book, I know you mentioned the essay, but had you been writing any fiction about dogs, or was this just something that materialized in its own form?
No, my fiction is, I mean, dogs might appear in my fiction, but that was very different stuff I was writing before this. And it really was just writing this essay. It really kind of, I don't know, it broke something open in me that I don't know, where I'm headed after this, because it really just speaking, I guess I've said this in some interviews, but like from me as me just felt like a totally new thing. And it felt very relieving to me and very empowering, I would say. And so, yeah, I wasn't writing about dogs in my fiction specifically, but yeah.
Kind of segueing from that then, do you have a plan for your next book?
I have a couple of, so I did write 2 novels before this that are sort of sitting around. It's interesting, like, I don't know if, I said to my husband the other day, I'm not sure I can go back to fiction after this. And I've done this, like, I've been working on fiction since I've known Jim at age, 18. But he said something which I really loved, which was, well, maybe this will make your fiction even better. So I'm not sure. I have a couple of ideas. One is a different novel, actually, fiction. So I'm not sure.
Well, it sounds like we have some audience members who are already getting excited for that. I like this one. Tell us a story that you left out and wish that you hadn't, or perhaps just want us to know about here tonight.
Gosh, what did I leave out? I'm having trouble remembering a story that I left out, honestly. Because mostly the dog stuff is what got left in.
Well, leave it for the next one.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't remember a specific story.
Well, that's great, because that's even more incentive for our audience to purchase the book, because that means everything that you want them to read is within their grasp.
Right.
Chloe's whole life is in that book.
It's just, yeah, it's all in there.
I think that this one seems to be from somebody who knows you personally. Her name is Kate, and she wants to know, listening to you talk about Otter is making me wonder if the act of writing the memoir has allowed you to be able to see Otter as pure dog, sort of releasing him from different and maybe more human expectations. I thought that was interesting, because you sort of mentioned he was the one, right, who's shared some of your anxiety and whatnot.
Well, he's actually the one, so he's the one who really, he's my newest dog, and he has made me really respect actually in a way, what a dog is. I spent so many years in all these other dogs kind of trying to embed myself in them and become the dog. Otter is not having any of that. He is just a dog. He's like a wolf. I mean, he is a wolf living in our house, and he reminds us of that all the time in different ways. He has all these idiosyncrasies that we kind of have to navigate, and I kind of, there's a different type of respect I have for that. Like it just kind of put me on a different plane with him. Yeah.
Does he socialize with dogs in different ways than Safari did?
Sorry, what did you say?
Does he socialize with other dogs in ways different than Safari did?
Yes, Otter's much more interested in dogs. Safari is not. So, and I mean, he'll kind of maybe sniff, but he's really not interested in other dogs. Yeah. And Otter is all in all the time. Just, yeah.
This person was wondering how having children changed the way that you relate to dogs.
So that was actually when I had children. That was a time in my life when I really had to kind of assess what my dog self was doing. There's not a lot of room, there for that kind of, disappearing into dogs when you have children. And so, I will say though that having Booker and having, he was kind of my first dog as an adult. Agatha, my childhood dog, died when I was 18. And then I didn't have a dog until I met Matt and Booker. And I spent, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years, probably 2.5 years, taking care of Booker. I was the home parent of Booker before I had my kids. So it actually, I do think of it as, I know it's very different having dogs and children. But I was the primary caretaker. So it did kind of, I don't know, I think prepared me a little bit. Taking him to the vet for all these different things. And then soon I would be at the pediatrician and, and I really took seriously introducing our animals to our babies as they came along, because I knew we weren't getting rid of the animals no matter what. It all went well though. Yeah. I took blankets home from the hospital, that smelled like the babies. I mean, I really went the whole 9 yards.
On the topic of Booker, we have someone else wondering, and they're speaking from their personal experience. Their dog passed away in March 2020. I'm so sorry. And they're still so overwhelmed by it. They can't imagine finding the words. So they're wondering how long after Booker's death you were able to start writing about it.
Yeah, it was hard. That was hard for me. So he died in 2015. That's why I said 2015 before. I was thinking of his death. 2015, and then I wrote that essay in 2018. So it did take a few years for me to actually sit down and write about him. I'm so sorry. It's very painful.
Right around the pandemic starting too. I can't imagine. I'm so sorry for your loss, audience member.
Yeah.
Let's see, we're almost reaching the end here. I think we have time for, let's do one more question and then a comment. So I love this one. This is really sweet. This person had a dog named Feather that they had to put down. Months later, they found a bone that she had buried in the garden. She sobbed and sobbed that Feather had thought that she had a future in which to dig up the bone again, but she didn't. What were the signs of Booker after Booker died?
Oh gosh. It's, so I can talk about Booker in a second, but what I immediately think of is Safari, our 13-year-old. So he buries tennis balls all over this part of our yard. I mean, just in this messy, leaf filled, and he loves especially balls that have we've run over with the lawnmower. And he likes these little pieces of them, and he'll bury them all over. And he's doing okay, but he's old and kind of starting to fail. And all I can do is think about all the balls we're going to find in the future. But with Booker, I would say certainly hair in the house. You know, I feel like there's still a hair of his here somewhere. He had a harness that we had on him because his back legs were really failing, and actually our 13-year-old Safari has that now too, which is really helpful. But you know, his collar we have, and yeah, he wasn't as much of a like a barrier of stuff, but it reminded me of Safari, that question. That's sweet.
That's beautiful. Well, I'll just close with this comment, and thank you all tonight for your wonderful questions. They were so great. An audience member wants to thank you for being so vulnerable. It's so helpful to us all, and it's closely related to our love of dogs. So I think that's true. And I wanted to say as well, I really think that this book is just going to guide like just countless readers through their journeys of love and of grief. So thank you for writing it.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
All right.
Can I just give a quick plug?
Of course, it is your launch.
To Mr. Jim Shepard.
This is you.
This is Jim's current book. It's incredible. He wrote it before the pandemic, and it's about the next pandemic, which is unbelievable. And yet every word and sentence is just filled with research and heart, and as always, just brilliance. And it's done in this way that there's kind of, it's almost like little poems about this. That's the way I read it. So it doesn't feel overwhelming, but it's brilliant. And any of his books, which I have sitting here.
A lot of time, Chloe.
Everyone.
Oh my gosh, this is great. By the way, everyone, the links to purchase Phase 6 and What is a Dog? This is the perfect segue, Chloe, thank you, are available in the chat right now. And as I mentioned earlier, Chloe did very graciously come in and sign copies for RJ Julia. So if you get your order in ASAP, that will be a special bonus perk in your copy of this amazing, amazing book. But yeah, that's about it. I wish we could stay and talk all night. This has been so wonderful. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Chloe. I'm just, thank you for sharing your time and for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And congratulations again, Chloe, on a beautiful book.
Thank you, Jim. Really appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Right, go hug your dogs, everybody.
Yeah.
Dog and buy Chloe's book.
I heard some beagles in the background.
I got to go deal with them.
Yes, you do.